Hello and welcome to your weekly technical update, your guide to the charts that matter this week. I'm Andrew Gagan. Well, let's begin in the commodities complex with Gary Glover from Novus Capital calling it the hottest space in the market at the moment. He says commodity stocks have proved to be very volatile technically in their structure. He begins with uranium and a look at BMN Resources, an exploration and development miner with a project in Namibia.
You'd normally like to sort of see a bit of a flatter pullback rather than a sort of deep pullback, but we have sort of broken out of that little descending wedge there on BMN, and we have sort of come back in a classic three-wave pullback there. So each of the pullbacks so far have just sort of come back in a three-wave manner and then accelerated higher. So you're kind of looking for to break out of that range and also break above a little minor swing high as well, which is kind of how these things have often started. So it does look encouraging here. So yeah, I just think considering how bullish commodities are in general here, I think this energy is definitely a sector to keep an eye on there. We're seeing some of the coal stocks be pretty buoyant there. Just quite a few of the different commodities have been pretty bullish there. So I think this uranium space that does look very interesting there. So sort of nice little basing from a few of them, but just starting to break up through some what I call sort of lower B wave patterns there, but just breaking to some new highs there. So I think BMN looks probably pretty strong. Paladin, probably Boss Energy is probably the only one I'd avoid there. That's probably the weakest of the sector.
Well, let's now turn to the energy sector. And more recently, we've seen strength in Woodside, but Gary Glover points out that the oil and gas explorer Santos has lagged a little, particularly after the aborted takeover offer.
Looking at the trend here, we do have a few high lows in place here. So we've sort of got a potential, what I call a 0, 1, 2, 3, where we've got 3 higher lows in place. And we have just broken above the 50-day moving average there. So in this market here, Andrew, it's all about momentum. And that 50-day moving average is really important for momentum traders there. So don't want to be on the downside of that. You want to be on the upside of that. And at the moment here, you're sort of seeing a lot more success trading above the 50-day moving average. So good signs here in the short term that Santos has sort of poked its head there, but still got a bit of work to do. But I think this looks sort of constructive there. And what's most importantly is the sector is pretty buoyant. So we know if we're trading above the 50-day moving average and we're trading in a sector which is pretty positive, then our odds of success are a little bit higher there. So those are sort of two key things I'm looking at in this market there, where it's probably a little bit more difficult than normal.
And elsewhere in the commodities complex, copper has recently hit record highs. So what's driving the price action? Richard Weissman from Weissman Consulting analyses the technicals.
I think psychologically, this is a spillover from the big move we're seeing in silver. So I know it doesn't really make sense in terms of economics, and I'll talk about the economics driving copper in a moment, but psychologically, investors and traders, when they look at their screens, generally speaking, they're looking at COMEX metals, which is gold, silver, and then copper, and it's just a little bit of psychological spillover, even though the industrial uses are way, way different. When we talk about those industrial uses, whether it's true or not, there's a lot of demand that's being allocated in terms of new generation here in the US for AI. AI is an electricity bear. It just eats up electricity, it eats up those electrons. And I think that is part of the real fundamentals as to what's driving this copper market north.
All right, so once again, those key levels to watch for?
Yeah, I drew a nice little trend line there. I think that the key levels are, believe it or not, $6 a pound. I don't think we're going to get there before year end, but this is a nice 2026 goal for us to hit, maybe Q1 of 2026, and if not, Q2. But I do think there's some powerful fundamentals that are driving this market, both in terms of psychological fundamentals and real fundamentals.
And that's it for this week's edition of The Charts. To watch, join us for more technical talk next week. Happy trading.